remember the moment everything came crashing down. It was a cold Thursday morning, the kind where the sunlight seemed to hesitate before making its way through the clouds. I sat at my desk, laptop open, the familiar hum of the machine almost comforting. I'd just hit send on another job application, and for the first time in a while, I felt optimistic. Maybe this one would be different. Maybe this time things would work out. But then the phone call came. It was a hiring manager I'd spoken to the day before. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, Kyle, but we've decided to go in a different direction." My stomach tightened. Rejection. Again. But as he continued, something in his tone caught me off guard. "We've received some concerning information regarding your background. It's not something we can overlook." The words hit like a blow to the chest. I couldn't breathe. "Concerning information?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "I'm afraid we can't continue with the process," he said, his words a death sentence to my hope. I was stunned. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Concerning information? What was he talking about? I didn't have a criminal record. I'd never been arrested. My past was clean, unblemished, or so I thought. As I sat there, the weight of confusion began to shift into anger. My hands trembled as I dialed my mom's number. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding. But deep down I knew. "Mom?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. Her voice was calm, too calm. "What do you mean, Kyle?" I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten, the seed of doubt beginning to sprout. "A hiring manager just called me. He said he had some concerning information about me. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I could feel my heart beating in my ears, the anger rising like an uncontrollable tide. Then why would they say that? Why would they reject me based on something that isn't true? "I don't know, Kyle. Maybe it's just a coincidence." But I knew it wasn't. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture they formed was something I wasn't ready to see. My parents had always tried to control my life, always tried to mold me into the person they thought I should be. They saw the version of me they had created in their minds, the son who was supposed to be perfect, the son who never made mistakes. And now they were willing to destroy me. I hung up the phone, my chest heaving, my fingers clenched into fists, the familiar feeling of betrayal washing over me like a wave. I had trusted them. I had believed them when they said they wanted what was best for me, but now it was clear. They weren't on my side. They had never been. The memories of my childhood flooded in those moments when I thought they cared. The times my dad had taken me to the park and taught me how to throw a baseball. The way my mom used to sit with me at the kitchen table and help me with my homework, her voice soft as she guided me through the math problems. But now those moments felt like lies. The trust I had placed in them felt like it had been stolen from me, piece by piece, over the years. Every smile, every encouraging word, they had all been empty. My breath came in ragged gasps as the reality of what had happened began to settle over me. They had sabotaged me. They had called every job I applied to and told them I had a criminal record. They had destroyed every chance I had at a future. And they did it all behind my back. I sank to the floor, my back pressed against the cold, hard wall. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. I had spent my entire life trying to be good enough for them, trying to prove that I wasn't a failure, that I was capable of so much more than they ever gave me credit for. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. It wasn't enough to make them proud. And now it was too late. The anger that had been building inside me began to shift, taking root in the pit of my stomach. It was about the years of my life that had been spent under their control. The years I had wasted trying to meet their impossible expectations. I wanted revenge. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen as I debated calling them back, confronting them. But what would that accomplish? They had already made their choice. A part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage had been done. The trust had been broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. I sat there, the silence in the room pressing in on me, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them win. But I also knew that revenge wasn't going to be easy. It would require patience, cunning. It would require me to dig deeper than I ever had before. I couldn't just take them down. I had to make them feel what I had felt, the sting of betrayal, the pain of being discarded, the suffocating weight of their lies. And that was when the plan began to take shape. I couldn't undo what they had done, but I could make them regret it. I stood up, my resolve hardening. It wasn't about the job anymore. It was about something far greater. I wasn't just going to get even. I was going to make them understand the cost of their actions. I was going to make them feel the same heartbreak I had felt when I realized that the people who were supposed to protect me were the very ones who had destroyed me. As I walked to the window, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders, I knew that there was no turning back. This was just the beginning, but there was one thing I couldn't shake. A part of me still felt that old, broken hope, the one I had carried for years, the hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would come to their senses. That they would see the damage they had done and finally admit the truth. But deep down, I knew better. They would never change. And I had to be ready for what came next. The phone call, the job rejections, the lies, they were just the beginning. The real story was only starting to unfold. And I was going to make sure they paid for what they had done. The silence in my apartment was deafening. It felt like the weight of the world was pressing in on me and I couldn't escape it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of my parents, the two people who were supposed to protect me, support me, love me, smiling at me with a false sense of pride. Their smiles, once comforting, now felt like daggers piercing my heart. They had betrayed me. And the worst part was, they hadn't even done it in the way I expected. I had always imagined that if I were to be hurt by them, it would be a single, loud betrayal, a moment where everything would come crashing down in an explosion of rage. But this was different. This was subtle. It was like a slow, creeping poison seeping into my life, and I hadn't seen it coming. I paced back and forth, trying to make sense of it all. My mind replayed the conversation I had had with my mom earlier, the way she had sounded so calm, so dismissive, as if nothing was wrong. It was like she knew what was happening but refused to acknowledge it. I grabbed my phone and opened the text messages. There were the job rejections, dozens of them. The ones that had always seemed like just another setback. But now, reading them again, I could see the pattern, the subtle thread of sabotage. My heart sank. They had reached out to every single company I applied to, telling them I was a criminal. They hadn't just ruined one opportunity, they had destroyed them all. I felt sick to my stomach. How had they done this to me? I tried to remember the good moments, the times when I thought things were right. The summer mornings when my dad would take me out fishing, teaching me how to cast the line just right, his voice full of encouragement as we shared stories. How I had believed with all my heart that they wanted the best for me, that they saw me as more than just their failure. I wanted to believe that those moments had been real. I wanted to believe that they had truly loved me. The love I had felt from them was nothing more than an illusion. It was a lie wrapped in kindness, a mask they wore to hide their true intentions. The moments I had cherished so much had been nothing more than a manipulation, a game they had played to keep me under their control. It wasn't just betrayal, it was control. They had never wanted me to be free. They had never wanted me to succeed. Every time I reached for something more, they pulled me back, either by their judgment or their lies. They had always seen me as an extension of themselves, not as an individual capable of making my own choices. And now, they had taken it a step further, destroying the very foundation of my future. I slammed my fist against the desk, the sharp pain of fleeting distraction from the storm raging inside me. The rage was all-consuming. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear everything down and make them feel the same way I felt. But it wasn't enough to just be angry. I couldn't afford to be reckless. If I was going to do this, I had to be smart. I had to make them pay in a way that would make them feel the full weight of their betrayal. The first stirrings of my plan began to take shape, but it was hard to focus. My mind was a mess. Part of me still wanted to confront them, to demand answers, to make them admit what they had done, but another part of me knew it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't bring me the satisfaction I craved. Confrontation wouldn't fix anything. They wouldn't care. They'd probably lie their way out of it, make excuses, and continue to act like the victims. No, this wasn't about confronting them. It was about making them understand the cost of their lies. I needed to hit them where it would hurt the most. Not physically, but emotionally. I needed them to feel the same sense of helplessness I'd felt when I realized they had ruined my chances at a future. I had to break them down the way they had broken me. But as I sat there, planning in the silence, another wave of emotion crashed over me. A deep sorrow. The kind of sorrow that felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. How had it come to this? How did I let them control me for so long? The questions were endless, but no answers came. Only the growing realization that I had been complicit in my own suffering. I had allowed them to manipulate me, to make me believe I was nothing without their approval. And now they had taken that away from me. I stood up and walked to the window, the cold glass pressing against my forehead as I stared out at the world beyond. Everything felt distant. The city, the people, my life, it all felt so far away. My world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to find my way back. But there was one thing I was certain of: I couldn't let this go. I couldn't allow them to walk away from this unscathed. They had stolen my future, and I was going to make them pay. I was going to make them understand the consequences of their actions. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the betrayal went. They hadn't just ruined my career, they had destroyed the foundation of everything I had worked for. They had stripped away the one thing that kept me going: hope. Without that, what was left? I picked up my phone again, scrolling through the contacts. I could feel the anger building inside me, but there was no turning back now. I had to strike first. The first step was going to be gathering the right people. I wasn't going to do this alone. I needed to make sure that when the time came, they would feel the full force of my revenge. I started making calls, reaching out to old contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. I needed people who owed me favors, people who could help me expose the lies my parents had woven around me. But even as I took the first steps towards my plan, a small part of me hesitated. I still loved them in some twisted, broken way. How could I not? They were my parents. The people who had raised me, the people who had shaped who I was. And yet, they had done this. They had torn apart everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped for. They had betrayed me in the most cruel way possible. I had to remind myself, this wasn't about love anymore. This was about justice. This was about making them understand the cost of their actions. The love I had once felt for them was no longer enough to stop me. But there was still that nagging feeling, that question. Would this truly make me feel better? Would revenge heal the wounds they had caused? Or would it only leave me more broken, more lost than I already was? As I sat down at my desk and began to outline the next steps of my plan, I knew that there was no easy answer. There was no clean, simple solution to this. But what I did know was this: I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them destroy my future, my dreams, my life. I was going to make them feel every ounce of pain they had caused me. But even as I plotted my next move, a heavy weight settled in my chest. Revenge would never heal the wound. It would never bring back the trust I had lost, the hope that had been taken from me. It would never replace the love that had been betrayed. But it would be enough for now. And as I took a deep breath, staring at the plan taking shape in front of me, I knew this was just the beginning. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about making amends. It was about reclaiming my life. And nothing would stop me from getting that back. Not even the people who had raised me. The darkness of the night outside felt like a reflection of the turmoil within me. The city was quiet, but the silence only seemed to amplify the noise in my mind. I sat at my desk, staring at the list of names in front of me. The names of the people I was reaching out to for help. People who had once owed me favors, people who I thought I could trust. But trust was something that had been shattered beyond repair. I clenched my jaw, the sharp edge of frustration biting into. Every moment, every decision I'd made in the past week was fueled by the overwhelming need to make my parents feel the weight of their betrayal. But even as I moved closer to executing the plan, I couldn't shake the bitter taste of uncertainty. What was I becoming? Was this really me? I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. The plan had grown more elaborate, more ruthless as time passed. I was carefully constructing every step. Nothing would be left to chance. I would expose my parents for the manipulative, controlling people they were. They had destroyed my future. Now it was my turn to destroy their image, to make them feel the sting of their own lies. But the deeper I got into the process, the more I felt the weight of what I was about to do. Revenge had always seemed like the solution, but now it felt like a dangerous, intoxicating beast that would never be satisfied. Each small victory, each piece of the plan falling into place only seemed to amplify my unease. I walked to the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. It to my lips. It felt like a dream, like an out-of-body experience. Was I really plotting against my own parents? The people who had raised me? How had it come to this? I couldn't understand it. I had trusted them with everything. I had given them all my loyalty, all my love. I had sacrificed so much in my life to try and make them proud. And yet, they had pulled the rug out from under me, leaving me to fall into a pit of hopelessness. And betrayal. They had destroyed my trust, the very foundation of who I was. I placed the glass back on the counter with a shaky hand. The man I had become wasn't the person I had hoped to be. He was angry, bitter, full of hatred. This wasn't me. This wasn't the person who had once believed in second chances. How had they turned me into this? The flashbacks came crashing back, unbidden. I could see my dad, his hand on my shoulder as he told me I could do anything I set my mind to. I could hear my mom's soothing voice as she assured me everything would be okay. That no matter how hard life got, they would always be there for me. But those words had turned to lies. Every promise, every expression of love had been a manipulation. They had always been the ones pulling the strings, always the ones making the rules. I had been a pawn in their game, and I hadn't even realized it until it was too late. I sank into the chair at the kitchen table, burying my face in my hands. My chest ached, a tight knot of sorrow and rage. How could they do this to me? How could they betray me, their own son, in such a heartless way. I thought back to the moment when I first realized the truth. It had been one of those quiet, fleeting moments, one that you might overlook if you weren't paying attention. I had been sitting in my apartment, looking through job applications, when I saw the rejection email. But it wasn't just a generic rejection. No, this one was different. The hiring manager had said something about concerning information regarding my background. I had brushed it off at first, thinking it was a mistake. But then the phone calls started, the calls from the other hiring managers who had rejected me. They all said the same thing. We've received concerning information. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone was actively sabotaging me, ensuring that every job I applied to was out of my reach. They had called every place I applied to, telling them I had a criminal record, tarnishing my reputation, destroying my chances at a future. And they had done it without a second thought, without any remorse. The betrayal was suffocating. It was the kind of betrayal that left you gasping for air, struggling to find your footing in a world that suddenly felt foreign. My trust in them had crumbled, piece by piece, like sand slipping through my fingers. The first wave of rage had been blinding. I wanted to scream at them, to confront them with the truth. But I knew that would be pointless. They wouldn't admit to it. They would lie, they would deny, they would make it my fault somehow. They always did. But there was a part of me, deep down, that still wished I could fix things. That still wished I could have the kind of relationship with them that I had once imagined. A part of me wanted to forgive them, to move past the hurt and rebuild. But I knew that was impossible. The damage was done. And so the plan took shape. I had reached out to people from my past contacts I had made along the way, people who had once owed me favors. I was going to expose them. I was going to leak the information about their financial troubles, their hidden secrets. I would make sure the world knew what they had done, the lies they had told, the mask they had worn. For years, each step brought me closer to the edge. The more I executed my plan, the more I felt like I was losing a part of myself. But it was necessary. They had taken everything from me. It was time to take something from them. The days passed in a blur. I worked tirelessly, building my plan, executing each step with precision. But even as I made progress, the weight of my actions began to settle in. The anger was still there, but it was now tempered with something else. I would never forget the moment when it all came to a head. I was sitting at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready to send the final piece of the puzzle to the media. My phone buzzed one of my contacts, someone I'd been working with on the inside. They had the information I needed. But as I picked up the phone and listened to the details, a wave of doubt hit me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was something more. It had become an obsession, a need for retribution that was all-consuming. I stood up, the phone still pressed to my ear, and walked to the window. The city below seemed so distant, so far away, and yet I felt trapped. I had built a wall around myself, and now it felt like that wall was closing in on me. For the first time since I had started this journey, I questioned everything. Was it worth it? Was the pain I had suffered worth the destruction I was about to bring? I thought about my parents, the people I had once looked up to, the people who had shaped me into who I was. I thought about the love they had shown me, or at least the love I had believed they had shown me. But that love was gone. It was just another lie, another mask they had worn. I took a deep breath and made my decision. The plan would go forward. I had come too far to back out now. But I couldn't shake the weight of what I was about to do. I was going to destroy them. But in the process, I was destroying myself too.